Attention, all staff at this time. Just follow all lockdown procedures.
No. Then why do you dress up like him? This is how crazy Batman's made Gotham. You want order in Gotham. Batman must take off his mask and turn himself in.
If you shared a cell with Edward Nygma the Riddler, you'd likely have a major headache by the end of your stay at Arkham. Or you'd be driven mad. Either or, really. The Riddler first appeared in Detective Comics issue 140 in 1948 and has been a mainstay in Batman's rogue gallery for years. He's a criminal mastermind who is rarely outsmarted by anyone but the world's greatest detective himself, hence why he has respect for Batman, although he'll continuously try to throw him off with a well thought out riddle linked to his crimes. So what would that mean for you if you ended up in Arkham and found yourself having to share a cell with this fellow? Well, he would mind with you so bad, hide all of your possessions, and make you solve riddles in order to get them back. Or he'd make you solve puzzles in order to have access to your shared toilet in your cell. The possibilities are endless really, but they'd all involve riddles and puzzles and schemes that would make your brain hurt. And nobody likes a smart roommate. Now imagine being passive aggressive with you. He would just give you really complicated riddles as like an answer to any question you asked. It would drive you insane. And at number 9, Mr. Freeze. While Victor Fries is one of the more empathetic and pragmatic villains on this list, the reason Mr. Freeze finds himself here isn't because of his personality or his criminal MO. It's because it would really suck if you had to share a cell with him, because it would be really cold. And that's unpleasant. Because of the laboratory mishap this cryogenic expert endured while trying to develop a cure for his terminally ill wife Nora, his body temperature sits at sub-zero levels, requiring him to wear a special suit in order to stay alive. Thing is, that suit is also equipped with a whole lot of weapons and tech that would be dangerous to have on Victor while he's imprisoned in Arkham. So his cell in Arkham has typically been depicted as a freezer room of sorts, or a specially made room that allows for the temperature that he requires to survive. Now imagine having to share that cell with him. For starters, it probably wouldn't be allowed because you would freeze to death, but even if you did get stuck in there temporarily with Victor, you'd have to wear a snowsuit so thick that you'd avoid going to the washroom just because of how difficult the process of taking off your pants would be. And if you can't poop, how's that living? And at number 8, the Mortician. Unlike our previous number, the Mortician makes this list because he is utterly terrifying. Porter Vito was a funerary agent who ran a funeral home. Imagine he was just a funerary agent who ran a beach resort? That'd be weird. His everyday involved him being well acquainted with corpses. So what did this fellow do? He came up with several different experiments and techniques to try to resuscitate his dead parents. Yikes. Then he started doing it to other dead people. Fun. Overall, he's a much smaller time Gotham villain who primarily uses zombie swarms in combat, and is therefore creepy as hell. I don't know about you guys, but I would rather avoid the Mortician altogether. What would you even talk about? Would he try to kill you and then resurrect you? And that would make the conversation even more strained. No thanks. And at number 7, Clayface. Clayface, aka Basil Carlo, has a very interesting skill set. He can change his clay body into anything or anyone. Now, imagine if you had to share a cell with him. And imagine if he didn't like you. That could be pure psychological torture if he was really able to get under your skin. But fear not, these days for the most part in DC Rebirth the character has turned a new leaf, or rather new clump of clay? He's trying out being a hero, having grown tired of the criminal lifestyle and taking Batman up on an offer to change his life. But after the fall of the Batman story arc, he was infected with the Monster Men serum, transforming him into a monster full of rage that then went on a rampage and destroyed part of Gotham. He would be presumed dead, but was revealed to have survived and had gone into hiding. Now powerless though. Needless to say, I don't think he'll be kicking around Arkham anytime in the recent future. And at number 6, Victor Zsasz. Victor Zsasz is one of Gotham's most notable serial killers. Every time Victor kills, he adds another tally with a knife onto his skin. And take a look at him, he's got a whole lot of tallies. He claims his mind is its most clearest when he kills and when he is counting his kills. He wears those tallies on his flesh like badges of honor. Victor won't really see you as human, but rather an opportunity to add yet another tally onto his scarred flesh. He won't hesitate to kill you unless you can prove your worth, meaning unless you're a kingpin of some sort or have a reputation, you're likely as good as dead if you get stuck in a cell with this lunatic. Moving on to number 5, Death Rattle. Death Rattle may be a much more small-time villain compared to others others on our list, but he is arguably one of the most terrifying by far. Aerosmith's death rattle Rain first appeared in Arkham Asylum Living Hell issue 1. He is a cult leader and a ruthless serial killer, a self-proclaimed psychic, and a founder of his very own religion, which was deemed wildly unpredictable and very amoral. He believed that he could communicate with the dead, and voices in his head told him to kill 56 members of his own ministry. So that's how he ended up in Arkham. And while there, he murdered a bunch of different kinds of Arkham inmates unexpectedly, all while claiming the asylum's ghosts were communicating with him. Now, consider this. Those ghosts who spoke to him, they would tell him later on in Arkham Asylum Living Hell issue 6 to throw himself into fire and sacrifice himself, which he would do willingly. The ghost's true motives? They just wanted him to kill himself and rot in hell for what he had done to his victims. Aw, ghosts. So even though he is dead, hypothetically speaking, being his roommate would be all sorts of creepy. You'd have to worry about being recruited to a cult, witnessing murder all the time, maybe even getting offed yourself in the name of Death Rattle's religion. Doesn't sound overly pleasant now, does it? Moving on to number 4, the Dollmaker. The Dollmaker is one messed up dude. While we haven't seen him in Arkham before, we'd imagine he would certainly end up there. First introduced in the New 52 and Detective Comics issue 1 of 2011, Dollmaker, aka Barton Mathis, was forced to go on hunting trips with his father when he was a child. Except they were hunting a very, very illegal kind of game. Human beings. He witnessed his father killing people and then cannibalizing them, and in addition to that, he witnessed his father being fatally shot by a young James Gordon. After spending a year in foster care, he would re-emerge as the Dollmaker wearing a mask made out of his own father's skin. He's also the fellow who cut off Joker's face and then reattached it, because clearly he's an expert. So all in all, if you'd prefer to not have your skin cut off and then reattached to your body in a different spot, or worse, being roommates with the Dollmaker definitely wouldn't be up your alley. Imagine you just woke up and your face skin is on your gut and you're just like, whoa, I've got 2 faces now. And at number 3, Professor Pig. Just look at him. If that isn't enough for you, let me explain Professor Pig, aka Laszlo Valentine, to you further. First appearing in Batman issue 666, prior to the New 52 continuity revamp, he was a former agent of Spiral who went mad thanks to mind-eroding drugs. After the crime syndicate showed up on Earth 3, Pig ended up using Gotham's hospital as his base after Batman disappeared. And he uses his Dollatron army to go around the city, sedating people, operating on them for experimentation without their consent. Most operations were absurd and severely disfigured his patients. He once switched a tennis player's hand with one of his feet. So if you'd like a good night's rest without having to worry about waking up and having your foot where your hand should be, Laszlo probably shouldn't be on the top of your potential roommate list. Up next, number 2, Killer Croc. For starters, with Killer Croc, you'd be sharing a prison cell that exists within a sewer in Arkham Asylum. The asylum repurposed it in order to hold Waylon Jones. Now he's lived in sewers his whole life, so it makes sense that his cell would also align with that in order to keep him calm. So, hygiene? Not that great. Plus he's got regressive atavism, which results in one's ancestral traits being expressed again, which is why he has scales, sharpened talons and teeth, and enhanced physical abilities that make him look like a giant crocodile, hence gaining the name Killer Croc, but also because he kills. That being said, Jones could be reasoned with potentially. He's cultured and even bilingual, having an admiration for French literature. He also knows what it's like to be downtrodden and hurt, and his sympathy could be appealed to. Either that or you'll get eaten, so 2 very different extremes, but regardless, you'll be in a sewer and imagine never being able to get the smell of poop out of your clothes or whatever. That's no bueno. And finally, in at number 1, the Joker. You gonna die. Definitely gonna die. The Joker is one Arkham inmate and Gotham criminal that cannot be reasoned with, and even though his cell is likely to be up to sanitation standards, you know he's gonna screw you up big time. He's gonna toy with you slowly until he decides to kill you, or he's just gonna find a creative way to murder you within your first day sharing a room. You definitely couldn't afford to sleep in that cell. That's for damn sure. Because you might not wake up. Or worse, you will wake up but you'll be super screwed up, or he might make you laugh to death. Would that be a horrible way to go though? Either way, the Joker has no qualms with torturing others just for shits and giggles. And if you're his roommate, well, you've likely got a terrible fate headed your way.
Number 10. Calendar Man. A lot of people forget about Calendar Man, as his gimmick seemed, well, a little weak, committing crimes on specific holidays based on the holiday's theme, a motif that probably seemed less silly back in 1958, when the character debuted in Detective Comics number 259. However, over the years the character has morphed into a credible, crazed, and dangerous threat. The character got a massive overhaul in Batman The Long Halloween, where he managed to go toe-to-toe with the Dark Knight himself on a mental level, keeping him on his toes. Since Rebirth, he now has meta abilities, aging and de-aging alongside the seasons, still obsessed with the perfect themed crimes. Calendar Man showcases that with enough planning and foresight, one can be a threat, even from Arkham itself, as some of his plans have been carried out while he was still locked away. Number 9. Lockup. This character comes to us from the DCAU, that being the DC Animated Universe, the interconnected universe that began in 1992 with Batman the Animated Series and ended in 2006 with the conclusion of Justice League Unlimited. This character comes from Batman TAS, and is yet another character to make the leap from that series into the comics, a la Harley Quinn. Lockup, aka Lyle Bolton, was a guard at Arkham who felt that things were far too lax, and sets about revolutionizing it. However, his methods were so harsh they abused the inmates, and led to him being fired, which caused him to go down a path of supervillainy. As you do. That ultimately led to him being locked up in Arkham himself. The danger here is obvious. He knows the ins and outs of the system. People are already breaking out left and right and center, and now someone who worked in security there is locked up inside. Poor planning, Gotham. Poor planning. The only good thing was for a time he was content to keep people from escaping from the inside. Number 8. Jean Loring. Jean Loring comes to us from a rather contentious story arc in DC that now, thanks to the New 52 and Rebirth, is long past, but will never be forgotten. We're talking about Identity Crisis. This was a tale in which heroes' significant others are being murdered, and the heroes are trying to find out who is doing it, who has access, and why. Well, it turns out the culprit was Jean Loring, the Atom's ex-wife, who wanted to get back together with him, so conceived of a plan to murder the loved ones of heroes to get him to come back to her and protect her, even going so far as to stage an attack on herself. Once this was discovered, the Atom took her to Arkham Asylum, just locking her up with some of the most dangerous criminals while she has full knowledge of a lot of their secret identities. Atom, what are you doing? Security there is terrible. Next time, an actual credited villain will be murdering family members. Number 7. Cornelius Stirk. This character first appeared back in 1988 in Detective Comics number 592. Cornelius Stirk is a serial killer who has the ability to make his victims see him as someone else. He uses this ability to get close to his victims and eat their hearts, after inducing fear in them, as he believes that he needs the fear hormones to live. The funny thing, well, not funny haha, more like funny huh, he was actually released from Arkham in his first appearance, declared sane, but then he stopped taking his meds, and it was not only back to murder, but back to Arkham. He's not used too much, but when he is, it's terrifying. He could be anyone. He's like the salt creature from Star Trek. Number 6. Charlatan. This is the tale of what happens when you have someone who gets too close to an OG villain. Don't do it. Just stop. Paul Sloan was an actor who was hired to play Two-Face in a kind of Lifetime movie. However, during the filming, the prop master switched out the fake acid for real acid, and initially gave him the exact same disfigurement, and later it was far worse. This set him off the deep end and also led to him being highly confused as to whether or not he was Two-Face or not. In the modern version, he was hired by rogues to impersonate Two-Face, and tortured by the Scarecrow till he lost the ability to feel fear at all. Driven mad, he set out to take down the villains that hired him. Well, Batman can't have that. That's his job. So off to Arkham with him. Maybe he can get them in there. Number 5. Ragdoll. So there have been multiple Ragdolls. For our purposes, we need the first, Peter Merkel, but in the New 52 continuity. Ragdoll is a villain with the ability to just completely compress himself, so he can collapse and move under things, like a ragdoll, hence the name. He uses his abilities for evil, because of course. While really he could probably end up in Blackgate, Batman comics have a tendency to put metas into Arkham, kind of the idea that their abilities make them crazier. Maybe they do. Number 4. Humpty Dumpty. This character first appeared in 2003 in the comic Arkham Asylum Living Hell. Humpty has a compulsive need to fix things. The only problem, not all the things he fixes are broken, and in the process he breaks them, causing things like subway accidents. He focuses on mechanical items that offend him in some way. This obsession lands him in Arkham, where he's actually one of the better inmates. He even fixes things for the other prisoners there, such as repairing the ventriloquist dummy. The only problem is he doesn't know what he's doing is wrong. So if he gets out, he will do it again, and no one knows what he will try to fix next. next. Number 3. The Dollmaker. The Dollmaker is the son of the Toyman, who developed a complex due to a lack of affection from his villainous father, who loved other children far more than him. This set him on a quest to one-up his father, as he sought to truly hurt children with his toys. After being taken out by Supergirl, he is thrown in Arkham, because everyone is just dumping their villains into Arkham. No asylums in Metropolis, I guess. I mean, they all talk in there. This is how villain leagues get started. Number 2. The Psycho Pirate. For our purposes, we're talking about the second Psycho Pirate, Roger Hayden. The Psycho Pirate possesses a magic mask with the power to project emotions, but that's far from what makes him dangerous. Even though his powers could be augmented to great effect, so that he could even control people. No, he rose to truly dangerous prominence during Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was a major DC story event, where they decided their multiverse and characters were out of control, so they constructed a climactic event to merge the universes and kill off unwanted characters. This occurred in 1985 to 1986. After this event, the Psycho Pirate was the only person for a time who remembered what happened, which drove him mad, and led to him being imprisoned in Arkham. But he also contained the ability to bring some of those characters and universes forth, if he were ever able to become sane. He even managed to bring some of these characters back during Grant Morrison's Animal Man run. Since then, and after even more reboots, his powers are back to what they were when they started. But for a time, he could have undone all reality. But I mean, DC does that themselves anyway. Number 1. Who could it be? Well, it's Jason Todd, the second Robin, unless you're in the DCAU-verse. Jason Todd was infamously killed by the Joker, beaten by a crowbar and left in a building wired to explode. His fate left up to reader vote, which rumor has it was ultimately decided by an angry fan with his phone on redial. Later, the character was resurrected when Superboy Prime punched the wall. Yes, he punched a wall and it ricocheted across realities, changing all kinds of things. However, when Jason first returned, he was far from fine, and for a time, some felt he was far from sane. Grant Morrison's Batman and Robin run saw the character being held in Arkham for observation, after all the havoc he had wrought, killing villains, attempting to take down the rest of the Bat family during the Battle for the Cowl arc. Really? Tim should never walk again after all that? But if we dealt with injuries in comics realistically, no one would be able to do anything. Ever. Dick was keeping him in there for his own safety, allegedly. But really, how safe is that? He's really lucky that Jason was just bitter and not actually insane. Otherwise, again, secrets revealed, alliances formed, people dead, which did happen while he was there. More so after he was successfully transferred to Blackgate. When he was, the inmate suicide rate spiked. A bitter ex-Bat family member with an axe to grind, a menace to villains and heroes alike. Sounds like a dangerous inmate to me.
Number 10. KG Beast. KG Beast is actually a Russian KGB cybernetically enhanced assassin who was trained by the Hammer. He has come up against Batman quite a few times, and despite the fact that he usually loses the day and has even been thought dead a few times, he always manages to come back. He even returned in Blackest Night as a Black Lantern. He kind of reminds me of a cybernetic Deadshot or Deadpool. KG Beast has never been imprisoned for long, and although you may not be as familiar with his appearances in comics, he one time killed an entire party of 100 just to guarantee one hit, and is known for successfully assassinating hundreds of targets. You may remember him from the animated film Assault on Arkham. Alas, the film did not greatly do him justice, as he was one of the first to die when he attempted to call Amanda Waller's bluff, not believing that she had implanted nano explosives in their necks. His was detonated and his head exploded as soon as he stepped out of the room, making him the example for the rest of the Suicide Squad. Number 9. The Spook. A classic villain of Batman's The Spook is Val Caliban. Well, he was until he was decapitated by Damian Wayne in an attempt to impress his father, Bruce Wayne. Spoiler alert, that did not impress Bruce. While the Spook's plans were often foiled by the Batman, to most he would seem pretty dangerous. The Spook was a criminal mastermind, escape artist, hypnotist, and minor theater illusionist. He's kind of like if somebody took a Scooby-Doo villain and made them somewhat darker and then just dropped them off in Gotham. While he was often caught by Batman, prison often could not hold him, since he was so good at escaping, and was a former architect who had actually designed Gotham's prison. He was eventually driven mad by his failures and ended up in Arkham Asylum. Number 8. Flamingo. Although Eduardo Flamingo's name may sound a little ridiculous and his getup may be a little eccentric, he kinda looks like a crazed matador, he is most certainly a dangerous killer. He was brainwashed by the mob into becoming a killer, and he has killed an impressive number of people, including his own family. He even almost managed to kill the Red Hood at one point, though Dick Grayson managed to stop him. While he is a ruthless killing machine, his weakness is his mental instability. The mob apparently also lobotomized him, which in the comic book world just makes his plans somewhat unfocused and easy to foil. Also, he has trouble speaking sometimes, though it also makes him unpredictable, which can at times be an asset. He is an unfeeling killer who has a tendency to eat his victims' faces. Ooh. Number 7. Firefly. Although all 3 incarnations have visited Arkham Asylum, I want to focus on probably the most disturbed and most famous of them all, Garfield Linz. What a name. Garfield Linz is a pyromaniac who quickly became obsessed with starting fires, and believes he can actually see visions in the flames. While he found moderate success as a pyrotechnician in the film and television industry, which lent well to his obsession with fire, he eventually found himself destitute as a result of the huge poverty issues in Gotham. Although, to be honest, I feel like if you're working on effects on a film set, you really should not be prone to poverty. But such is the life in Gotham apparently. This causes him to go on a crime spree and become a professional arsonist. At one point he even started a fire in a chemical plant which caused an explosion, resulting in Firefly catching fire himself, which inspired him to later make a fireproof suit for future criminal endeavors. Surprising that Garfield did not think to do that before he was severely burnt. You playing with fire, you're gonna get burned. Amygdala. You may not remember Amygdala, but he was one of the inmates that Bane unleashed on Gotham in the events of Nightfall. Amygdala's name comes from the part of the brain that helps to control emotions and is responsible for storing emotional memories, which helps your brain determine appropriate emotional responses to certain situations. Man, if I say emotional one more time. Amygdala had this part of his brain removed in an attempt to help diminish his violent and homicidal tendencies. However, this had the opposite effect, as he no longer possessed the part of the brain that helped him to be self-aware when it came to his emotional responses, making him just rage all the time. He has the physique of a championship bodybuilder, and as such can be very dangerous when he goes into a rage. Fortunately, Batman is often able to calm him down, and he even spends some time as one of the good guys, living as an ally and in the same apartment as Dick Grayson while working as a warden at a prison. Number 5. James Gordon Jr. Many people are familiar with Commissioner Gordon's daughter, Barbara Gordon. She is also a member of the Bat family as Batgirl and was for a time Batman's tech whiz as Oracle. She is also the leader of Birds of Prey and on again off again love interest of Dick Grayson. But what do you know about Jim's son? James Gordon Jr. may not often be talked about in the comics, but it's not because he's not interesting. He just kinda decided to go in the opposite direction of his sister. James Jr. is actually a psychotic murderer. He was taking medication to help him with his psychotic tendencies, but he's a smart man and he was able to actually reformulate his meds to make him more psychotic instead. He believes that empathy is a weakness and aims to take down the Bat and, in turn, poison an infant nutritional facility. It's gonna make everybody psychotic. Woo! Number 4. Solomon Grundy. A villain who just keeps dying and coming back. Solomon Grundy is best described as a zombie. While he isn't always a bad guy, he did work alongside Hawkgirl in the Justice League animated series and even died in the process and went to heaven. He is definitely not someone you'd want to run into in a dark alley. Solomon Grundy was first introduced in 1944 and at the time was kind of DC's Hulk equivalent. He is super strong and large with limited intellect, and he is also gray, which was the Hulk's original color. While he has changed over time, his smarts, or lack thereof, still seem to be his downfall, making him a powerful character but not a criminal mastermind. He usually works underneath more acclaimed villains, acting as the muscle. In fact, he's even been mind controlled by supervillain Gorilla Grodd for such a purpose. He appears as an asylum inmate in the Injustice games. Cheetah. One of Wonder Woman's most notable nemesis, Cheetah is slated to be the new big bad for our heroine actually in her newest film, Wonder Woman 1984. Her were-cheetah-like abilities make her a surprisingly formidable foe for Diana Prince, though the version in the film is actually Barbara Ann Minerva, whereas the original Cheetah was Priscilla Rich, who actually made her debut only a couple of years after Wonder Woman in the comics. Priscilla Rich is also the incarnation we're referring to in this list. She fights against Wonder Woman and some other members of the Justice League in Arkham Asylum in the fun comic series Batman 66 meets Wonder Woman 77. This version of Cheetah is a wealthy socialite who is jealous of Wonder Woman and is skilled in acrobatics. Number 2. Brainiac. So this only happens in the LEGO Batman games, but it still happened. And Brainiac is one of the most powerful telepaths in the DC universe, and is pretty undefeatable in most continuities, though not all continuities. In LEGO Batman 3 Beyond Gotham, the villain's appetite seems to have surpassed just shrinking cities. Instead, he aims to shrink the entire Earth by absorbing the energies of a representative lantern from each of the different lantern corps, and focusing that energy through a power crystal. He ends up defeated and shrunk down himself, so cute, before being placed in Arkham Asylum. He does of course manage to escape shortly afterward, however, when Luthor accidentally breaks the glass bottle that Brainiac is being kept in, and he is returned to his normal size. Number 1. Superman. In Emperor Joker, Superman becomes an inmate at Arkham Asylum daily. He always escapes but is recaptured by Bizarro, who once again locks him up in the asylum. In this altered reality, everyone believes him to be a murderer despite the fact that he professes his innocence. He finally manages to break this cycle when he gets captured by a somewhat evil corporate version of Lois Lane. She can't help but be drawn to him, though she doesn't really know why she is. She originally decides to help him only so she can trap him and experiment on him, but sets him free because she finds she has inexplicable feelings for him. Oh, I wonder why.
And at number 10, Mr. Freeze. There is no doubt that Mr. Freeze, aka Victor Fries, is one of Batman's most deadly foes. He's a former cryogenics expert who got into a lab accident when trying to cure his terminally ill wife. He built himself a criminal empire in order to have the funds to continue his research. Freeze ends up at the bottom of our list primarily because he's a villain who often cooperates quite well with Arkham's staff, and his tragic and complex nature often lends him to be a more empathetic villain. Compared to the others on our list, or our part 1, Mr. Freeze isn't really trying to vindictively kill others in Arkham. On some occasions, he's even been allowed to continue his research while locked up there, and he's considered one of the only sane inmates in the asylum, primarily there because of its intensive security and ability to have specialized holding cells, which Freeze needs in order to maintain his body temperature and stay alive. And at number 9, Two-Face. Harvey Dent first appeared in Detective Comics issue 66 back in 1942, making him one of the longest-running adversaries of Bruce Wayne's. After acidic chemicals are thrown at him during a court trial, the once Gotham City district attorney went insane, adopting the criminal persona of Two-Face thanks to his appearance. Becoming obsessed with the concepts of chance and fate, the character is often depicted as schizophrenic, bipolar, or having some sort of dissociative identity disorder, meaning he's exactly the kind of individual who, based on his criminal record, needs to be in Arkham, despite the facility's extraordinary track record when it comes to not reforming its inmates. In his post-crisis depiction, Dent had always had mental health issues, but managed to hide them thanks to his unyielding work ethic. Regardless of that, Two-Face's list of crimes is quite massive, and his unpredictability makes him a force of nature that needs to be approached with severe caution. And at 8, Lex Luthor. Ah yes, the DCEU Lex Luthor. Like much of the rest of Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, Luthor got a whole lot of hate for being a very weird depiction of the supervillain. He was sort of like the Joker meets the Riddler meets Jesse Eisenberg with a shaved head. Anywho, he ended up getting thrown into Arkham, which is something that's revealed in the Ultimate Edition of the film, with some dialogue noting that Batman pulled some strings to get him transferred there. Lex managed to break out of Arkham after hearing about Superman's resurrection and the formation of the Justice League, proving once again that Arkham, even in its cinematic adaptations, is super easy to break out of. Seriously, how many times has the Joker broken out? Yeah, it's a lot. And at 7, Deadshot. Deadshot might not be the first character to come to mind when you think of deadly Arkham inmates, but do not be fooled. He's the most dangerous assassin in Gotham City, and knows his way around a ton of firearms, using them as his main MO. Initially, he found himself being locked away in Blackgate Prison, but ended up being sent over to Arkham when he proved that he required a special maximum security facility in order to keep him in check. And at 6, the Riddler. Edward Nygma first hit the scene in DC's comics back in 1948, in Detective Comics issue 140. He's a criminal mastermind with a genius-level intellect capable of extraordinary lateral thinking when it comes to formulating puzzles and decoding them. Arguably, his deductive abilities gives the Dark Knight a run for his money. With no superhuman abilities and relying on being a brilliant strategist, the Riddler often gets real creative with his, well, riddles and traps, making him someone that any old civilian or criminal needs to be extremely cautious when in close proximity to. And at number 5, Dr. Phosphorus. Hey, you know what's dangerous? Someone who has burning skin, and also emits toxic fumes, and can manipulate radiation. All of those things are just pretty unsettling for human beings in general to be around, in my personal opinion. I don't know, whatever floats your boat, if not. So naturally, not a huge fan of Dr. Phosphorus. Hypothetically speaking, if he was real. Dr. Phosphorus is a dude named Dr. Alex Sartorius, who first appeared in Detective Comics issue 469 in 1977. After a crack in a reactor core caused the Doctor to get 5 million slivers of radioactive hot sand into his body, his physicality greatly transformed into a body that burns forever, quite literally. A power that he only gains better control over when he sells his soul to Neron in order to be able to wear things like clothes. Yeah. He uses his powers to get revenge against those he blames as being responsible for his terrible fate, which ends up leaving him to cross paths with good old Batman, with him being tossed into Arkham as the result. Now, he's not a villain who generally makes the rounds a whole lot, but considering his condition, he's no doubt a danger to those around him. And to anyone who tries to fight him. Not a fan of getting burned. And at number 4, Black Mask. Back during the Battle for the Cowl event, a pre-New 52 storyline, Jeremiah Arkham, who was the chief psychologist and head administrator of Arkham Asylum, lost his mind, which has happened a few times, and ended up taking on the identity of Black Mask after a project to rebuild the asylum went haywire. Now throughout the storyline, as we see Jeremiah becoming increasingly unhinged, it's eventually revealed that he is actually Black Mask, orchestrating all of these terrible things to happen in the asylum. How did he end up as Black Mask? Well, it's all thanks to the influence of Hugo Strange and the Joker. There's also a brief moment where he appears he might return to sanity, but then that's all kinda shot to shit. All in all, having the dude who, ran the asylum turn out to be one of the bad guys who's actually hurting others in the asylum and coming up with terrible master plans, yeah, a little unsettling. Definitely not the ideal inmate. And at number 3, Scarecrow. Scarecrow is the master of fear. First appearing in World's Finest Comics issue 3 back in 1941, Jonathan Crane has occasionally been depicted on alternate Earths as a staff member working at Arkham Asylum who is driven mad by the environment. But as far as the main continuity is concerned, he's always been much more of an inmate. Crane is an expert in psychology and biochemistry, and uses fear-inducing drugs and toxins that cause those affected to severely hallucinate, experiencing their worst nightmares. He is quite literally addicted to fear, and one of the only things he himself fears is Batman, which causes him to compulsively seek out confrontations with the Dark Knight. And there's nothing quite like an addiction to motivate you. Causing trouble at Arkham or attempting to break out isn't out of the norm for him, all to get Bat's attention. Perhaps the most terrifying iteration of the Scarecrow in Arkham Asylum, though, comes from the Arkhamverse video games. In Arkham Asylum, the Scarecrow is featured in arguably one of the best and scariest boss battles in the entire franchise, with Bruce experiencing extremely traumatizing moments based on his past, all thanks to Scarecrow's fear gas affecting him. It's an excellent level design that really encompasses so much of what Batman is all about, all while allowing the Scarecrow to really shine at his most deadliest. And at number 2, Hugo Strange. Hugo Strange is another example of a character who has gone from being an Arkham staff member to someone who has gone entirely mentally insane, depending on which alternate Earth depiction of him you're looking at. The character is one of Batman's earliest recurring villains, having first appeared in Detective Comics issue 36 back in 1940. He debuted as a mad scientist bad guy who uses something called a concentrated lightning machine to create dense fog in order to allow his gang to rob banks unseen. Batman stops him and Strange manages to set a trap for him, but eventually the Dark Knight is victorious and ships him off to jail. Strange's next appearance features him breaking out of the city asylum, prior to it being given the name Arkham. He uses 5 other inmates as test subjects, turning them into 15-foot tall monsters. Fast forward to post-crisis, his origin story changes, with him initially helping a police task force capture Batman, becoming absolutely obsessed with the Caped Crusader. He ends up using inmates from Arkham to test out his experiments before having a mental breakdown of his own. His obsession with Batman and his genius-level intellect, along with his mastery of chemicals and psychology, makes him a threat to anyone locked up with him. He's been known to manipulate the worst of individuals. In addition to that, he plays a massive role in the Arkham City video game, with him being a ringmaster of sorts. It's all about manipulation with Dr. Strange. And he's not Dr. Strange, he's Hugo Strange. It's all about manipulation with Hugo Strange. And finally, in at number 1, Bruce Wayne. No one said this list had to only be bad guys. Batman has been admitted to Arkham on several occasions. And actually, Bruce Wayne's admission to Arkham is the entrance point for the storyline in the Arkham City video game. In that case, Bruce ends up getting admitted so he can put an end to the chaos that's now brewing inside of the newly established Arkham City, dragging him into a bigger plot by Hugo Strange and ultimately the Joker, in what is arguably the best written game of the series and one of the best superhero video games of all time. Anywho, in the comics, Batman was once admitted to Arkham after Jeremiah Arkham had rebuilt the the facility in order to test out its effectiveness and functionality, which ultimately led to Black Mask throwing Batman into a cage match against other inmates. Generally, his stints in Arkham are voluntary, but that still does make him an inmate. And hey, I don't know about you guys, but I definitely would not want to be locked up in there with him, especially if I was a criminal. No bueno. In at number 10, the Ventriloquist. Ventriloquist, aka Arnold Wesker, is a criminal genius who suffers from dissociative identity disorder, which manifests itself in the dummy he carries around with him, a psychotic puppet called Scarface. When he first appeared in the comics, he would execute his crimes via Scarface, who was dressed up like Al Capone. There has been 2 others to take up the mantle of Ventriloquist aside from Wesker, who at one point was killed off in the comics. The other 2 are Peyton Riley and Shauna Belzer, the latter appearing in the New 52 as a foe of Batgirl's. While Wesker has no superhuman powers and lacks much of an ability in hand-to-hand combat, he's a master criminal strategist, and sometimes brains are more dangerous than brawn when it comes to Arkham Asylum. In at number 9, Maxi Zeus. Maxi Zeus is a bit more of an obscure Batman villain. He is a delusional criminal who firmly believes that he is literally the Greek god Zeus. First appearing in Detective Comics issue 483 back in 1979, Maxi was a Greek history teacher who lost his mind after he lost his wife. Using his intelligence and cunning, the character became a prominent criminal figure in Gotham. When he was initially locked up in Arkham in Batman and the Outsiders issue 14, Bat suggested that he be put in the maximum security wing. Instead, he was placed in a regular security cell and eventually escaped because of it, forming a team of mythology-based superhuman agents called the New Olympians afterwards. On top of his comic book appearances, he's also present in the Arkhamverse video games. Well, somewhat. There's a cell in the Arkham Asylum video game covered in Greek symbols implying that it was once Maxi's. You can find it in the patient pacification chamber in the intensive treatment center. Then, in Arkham City, you can find his nightclub Gotham City Olympus, along with a story that tells how he disappeared after a few electroshock therapy sessions. And at number 8, Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Upon first look, Tweedledum and Tweedledee may not be all that intimidating, but don't let their comical appearance fool you. Based off of the characters from Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, these 2 were first introduced into the DC universe back in 1943. During the Golden Age, they were significantly less of an issue than they are post New 52. Their powers back then consisted of them using their fat bodies to roll and bounce around. I shit you not. These days, they have superhuman strength and resistance, essentially making them big old dangerous bodyguard types. They can lift up to 1 ton, definitely a pair that you wouldn't want to get into a fight with. And at 7, Doodlebug. Doodlebug, aka Daedalus Bach, is a self-proclaimed artist of sorts. Or rather, he believes he receives visions of inspiration and then recreates said visions on whatever canvas they indicate, which often means he uses people as a canvas. Gross. Dude is a murderer. He killed his cellmate Junkyard Dog, who was a poor fellow obsessed with collecting and investigating trash, by plucking his heart out of his chest with his bare hands. Just like, Kill Bill style. This was part of his satanic ritual, of course. Aside from having a few awkward similarities to Jean-Michel Basquiat, both physically and stylistically when it comes to Doodlebug's art, the character is one of the more obscure Arkham inmates, having only appeared in Arkham Asylum Living Hell for 6 issues in 2003. And at number 6, Death Rattle. Death Rattle actually killed our previous number, Doodlebug, as part of a demonic sacrifice. A lot of rituals going on in Arkham sometimes. Needless to say, he's one creepy dude. Erasmus Death Rattle Rain is not only a serial killer, he's also a cult leader, and claims that he's a psychic. He founded his own religion, which generally doesn't operate on any sort of ethical foundation whatsoever. He also went about killing 56 members of his congregation, so clearly it's not the most predictable of religious institutions, that's for sure. Plus he shared a cell with Warren White, aka Great White Shark, so you know he ain't a pushover. Death Rattle believes that he can communicate with the dead, and when Arkham was attacked by demons and ghosts of its inmates' victims, the former members of his church told him to throw himself into the fires and sacrifice himself. Death Rattle willingly did it, but turns out the ghost just wanted him to die and rot in hell. Ghosts have feelings too, you guys. Moving on to number 5, Prometheus. Prometheus is a villain who is a foil to Batman of sorts. He possesses no actual superhuman abilities, but instead has undergone training similar to Bruce Wayne's. He's done intensive mental and physical training, uses similar technology to the Cape Crusaders, and even has a strobe light capable of disorientation and hypnotism. He can also download the knowledge and physical skills of his foes into his brain via a compact disc, which is like kind of insane and kind of dates him a little bit. There have been a few iterations of Prometheus over the years, with the most popular one being an unnamed villain, the son of 2 hippies who was traumatized at a young age when his parents were brutally killed by police. This led to him undergoing a similar journey to Bruce Wayne's, except fighting on the opposite side than the Dark Knight. In other words, a man with that kind of determination, willpower, and commitment to annihilating the forces of justice ain't someone to take lightly, especially not in Arkham. And at number 4, the Mad Hatter. Mad Hatter is yet another one of the more comical members of Batman's rogue gallery, and he's been in Arkham quite a lot over the years. First appearing back in 1948 in Batman issue 49, the Mad Hatter, aka Jervis Ted sketch, didn't have many friends growing up due to his physical appearance. But what he did have, though, was a genius-level intellect, which led to him becoming a neuroscientist and inventing a mind control technology. He knows how to dominate and control the human mind like the back of his hand, often making use of hypnosis. He's also great at hiding covert mind control devices, which means he's definitely the guy that you'd want to hit up in prison to sneak in contraband. But surely, that would come with a price. In at 3, Catwoman. Catwoman, aka Selina Kyle, has straddled the line of anti-hero and villain for many years now. Initially a baddie back in the golden age of comics when she first appeared in Batman issue 1 of 1940, she's an expert burglar, skilled gymnast, and knows her way around hand-to-hand combat. Don't even get us started on her cunningness or intellect. Girl has outsmarted some of the best, even Batman at times. While she wouldn't initially be a threat on your radar if you were locked up in Arkham, piss her off and, you're in for a whole lot of trouble. Selina's capabilities are not to be taken lightly, and she can kick some serious butt, especially when you least expect it. Now from one anti-hero to the next, in at number 2, Harley Quinn. Now if you were to stroll into Arkham and you're like, who's gonna be an immediate threat? Well, Harley Quinn and her unpredictability factor is definitely deadly and should be avoided. Hopefully you wouldn't end up in Arkham though, because it's a fictional place. You do not want to accidentally come face to face with Harley Quinn when she's having a bad day, or even say the wrong, or sometimes even the right thing to get her going. Having spent quite a lot of time with the Joker can do that to you. Harley first appeared in Batman the Animated Series before making her comic debut in 1999 in Batman Harley Quinn. She was initially a psychiatrist who worked at Arkham, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, who fell victim to the manipulation and influence of the Joker, falling in love with him and becoming his sidekick and accomplice. She herself became quite skilled in manipulation, and her unpredictability, as we mentioned, is one of the most dangerous things about her. These days, Harley has shifted into anti-hero territory, no longer in the Joker's grasp. Instead, she's now dating her once best friend Poison Ivy, and the side perk of that relationship is she's become immune to various toxins, healing quicker from minor wounds, as well as getting a boost in strength and her natural agility, something that definitely would come in handy when it comes to riots at Arkham, since those seem to happen a lot. And finally, in at number 1, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul is a criminal terrorist and mastermind. He's got a genius-level intellect, he's a master alchemist, a master swordsman, has longevity thanks to the Lazarus Pits, and a knowledge of mystical objects. There's a lot going on there that you would definitely not want to run into and ever cause trouble with. On top of that, he's also a villain with a point, and really, that's probably the most dangerous thing on this list. When it comes to being locked up in Arkham Asylum with Ra's is the leader of the League of Assassins, meaning he's got a whole lot of henchmen, and that is not something that is good in Arkham Asylum if you are not someone who has a whole lot of henchmen. Ra's has also been a match for Batman many a time. Hell, he respects Batman, referring to him as detective. Ra's has been described as a 700-year-old international terrorist and has come back to life on multiple occasions, meaning he's not the kind of dude you want to have holding a grudge against you. He's also a guy who believes that achieving perfect environmental balance is achieved by killing off most of humanity, so that is also a thing. Fellow as ruthless as that ain't someone you want to be tangoing with in a prison cell, that's for damn sure. And at number 10, Zsasz. Victor Zsasz is pretty scary. Sure, he doesn't have supernatural powers like some of the other villains on our list, but he is batshit insane and oh so dangerous. While the Gotham television series doesn't quite do him the justice that other adaptations like the Arkham video games do, Zsasz is definitely not a character to take lightly. For context, all those tallies on his body, well, there's one for each and every person that he's killed. He's proud of his kills. He wears them like a badge of honor. Zsasz also operates in a much more subtle fashion compared to other inmates locked up in Arkham. He isn't a showman, and he keeps to the shadows. Needless to say, if he were to break out of Arkham, he's the kind of threat that would have both citizens and the Gotham PD shaking in their boots. And at number 9, Man-Bat. Kirk Langstrom, aka Man-Bat, is an example of a vicious villain who needs a special holding cell, or at least when he's under the influence of his serum, that is. Langstrom was a zoologist who attempted to extract a bat's sonar sense, and tested the formula that he created on himself, which resulted in him transforming into this hideous half-man, half-bat hybrid, and also gave him the ability to have that sonar thing. So it worked, but bad consequences. When he has his serum, his intelligence depletes, and he goes on a mad rampage, becoming almost incontrollable. Strength, endurance, and agility reaching superhuman levels, along with the ability to see in the dark thanks to his bat-like abilities. Needless to say, Kirk is much easier to subdue and keep locked up in Arkham while in his human form. But if arriving at Arkham in his Man-Bat form, well, let's just say that I hope the security guards have a whole lot of tranquilizers on hand. Up next, number 8, Professor Pig. Professor Pig is one messed up Batman villain. This sick SOB's MO is to perfect people by making them into Dollotrons. Yes,
perfect. This is a process of his in which he bonds false doll faces to his victim's face in a permanent and gruesome manner, using the likes of hammers, ice picks, cordless drills, you name him. He's versatile. One of the weirdest and most insane villains to ever be written into Batman's comics, he's genuinely disturbed, a trait that should not be taken lightly. The one reassuring thing about Pig is that while he's kept secure in Arkham, he's less of a threat than others on this list. But the second that he gets the chance to continue his work, well, let's just say you'd want to be far, far away from this inmate. And at number 7, Clayface. When he was first introduced by Bill Finger and Bob Kane back in Detective Comics issue 40 in 1940, Clayface, aka Basil Karlo, was a B-list actor who began a life of crime under the guise of a villain he once played in a horror movie. It wasn't until the 50s that the shape-shifting version of Clayface came to be, as science fiction villains were on the rise during the start of the Silver Age. Karlo wouldn't return until after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, Clayface has the ability of using his clay-like anatomy to transform himself, and also concoct items like weapons out of his body. Clayface is an example of a villain at Arkham who requires a special cell to contain him in order to ensure the safety of everyone in the facility, and to ensure that he won't be able to break out by any easy means. And at number 6, the Penguin. Compared to others on our list, the Penguin is by no means a villain who is physically intimidating. Instead, it's this criminal mastermind's intellect and connections that makes him threatening in Arkham. Considering Oswald Cobblepot is one of the foremost powerful villains in Gotham City, whenever he's locked up in Arkham, he's well protected. You do not want to get on his bad side, or surely you'll suffer major consequences. And it won't be him doing the dirty work, that's for sure. Penguin has proved his ingenuity and cruelty on many an occasion, and even when he's locked up, he's still got major influence over what happens outside of Arkham's walls, and of course, within them. And at number 5, Killer Croc. Killer Croc is an obvious inclusion on this list. Look at him. Killer Croc is another villain who requires his own specially made holding cell, which is actually often depicted as the sewers of Arkham Asylum. This is because of his deadly strength and sheer size. In addition to those traits, he also has enhanced endurance and speed, with skin that is nearly impenetrable, even from high caliber weapons fired from a distance. So needless to say, he's not a villain whose cell you'd want to accidentally wander into. And at number 4, Great White Shark. Great White Shark, aka Warren White, is the perfect example of the kind of effect that Arkham can have on an individual. While his origin story might not be as popular as someone like Harley Quinn's, both of which are tied integrally to Arkham Asylum, Great White Shark's is perhaps more ruthless, since his transformation was a means of survival rather than the product of manipulation. Now, prior to his time in Arkham, Warren White, who first appeared in Arkham Asylum Living Hell issue 1 in 2003, was a crooked financier who was nicknamed Great White Shark for his ruthlessness when embezzling millions from his company's pension fund. When he was caught, he pled insanity, which led to him being sent off to Arkham. And finally, in at number 1, the Joker. If Poison Ivy's biological manipulation didn't do it for you, well, surely the Clown Prince of Crime's more off-kilter ways of manipulation will. The Joker has that certain je ne sais quoi when it comes to his manipulation. I mean, look at what he did to Harley Quinn, and yeah, that probably didn't turn out for the best, did it? There's been multiple times in the comics that the Joker has managed to get out of Arkham Asylum, and also many a times in other adaptations too. I mean, that's how the Arkham Asylum video game goes down and what ends up leading to him getting out into Arkham City. It's intense. Dude always has a plan in some weird twisted way. A plan that always manages to f with Batman. But back to the comics. In Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, the Joker manages to manipulate his way out of Arkham once news of Batman's return surfaces, with the villain feigning that he's returned to sanity to the point where he and his psychologist land a spot on a popular talk show in Gotham. And what does he do? He uses his Joker toxin to straight up murder the entire studio audience, his doctor, the crew, the host, pretty much everyone in that studio, and then escapes. Classic Joker behavior. There's no length that he wouldn't go to in order to encounter his beloved bats, or to creatively murder a slew of people in a way that he found comical. Dude's all about the joke, with the butt of that joke often being mass homicide.
And at number 10, Professor Milo. Let's start off our list with Dr. Achilles Milo, a renowned chemist who used his skills and knowledge to screw with Batman in one of the most hilarious ways. One of these plans was a murder plot in which he attempted to chemically alter Batman's mind with a drug that made him afraid of anything bat-shaped. He also gassed him alive with the chemical that made him lose his will to live. So as you might be wondering, what's this Silver Age 1957 villain doing on a list of scary supervillains? Well, it's because by the time that the 70s rolled around, his character took a different turn in Batman issue 255, when Milo manipulated a fellow inmate into using a serum that would transform said inmate into a werewolf, who he then tried to use to murder Batman with. But that is not the scary part. What is the fact that this plan backfired and he was mauled by the werewolf, somehow managed to survive, and then continued his schemes in Arkham, where his exposure to his chemicals made him insane. He briefly retired but then returned during 52, not to be mistaken with the new 52, where he had suffered from some sort of maiming that was undisclosed, with both of his legs missing. Chemicals, they're scary, right? Maybe just be careful when using them and you won't end up like Achilles Milo. Up next at 9, Copperhead. Copperhead is the stuff of nightmares, and the worst part? There's 2 of them. If you're not a fan of snakes, this number definitely is not for you. Copperhead is a giant snake villain with limbs, so he can run and walk, but still can constrict people and suffocate them to death. Fun stuff. The first time he appeared during the New 52, he was able to overpower Black Canary due to the fact that he doesn't have ears and could not hear her powerful screams. While he was eventually thwarted by the Justice League, who blinded him with a flashing billboard, lol, he ends up being recruited to the secret society of supervillains, who he would later deflect from, causing him to then be assassinated by Deathstroke. All in all, just a series of bad luck. Then came DC Rebirth, in which we saw an apparent successor pop up in All-Star Batman issue 2, but then the original also reappeared, taken down by Batman and Catwoman in Batman issue 14 volume 3. A handful of issues later, when Batman was in Arkham, Copperhead would get his butt whooped by Bane during an attempt by a slew of villains to get to the Cape Crusader first. Up next at 8, Punch. Punch is a character who ended up in Arkham Asylum of his own free will. He had previously been imprisoned in Santa Prisca, separated from his beloved criminal partner Julie. Escaping, he would find Commissioner Gordon, drug Commissioner Gordon, and then impersonate Commissioner Gordon in order to get into Arkham in order to save Julie. Batman at the time was hoping to recruit him into the Suicide Squad, and he and Julie actually ended up on the team working together. But after a whole kerfuffle with Bane and Catwoman, the 2 of them were seemingly killed. Psych, they actually faked their own deaths, preventing themselves from being incinerated by covering their bodies in flame-proof bubblegum, as one does, clearly, and then escaped said incinerator by fleeing in a raft. They were eventually caught, but given time off of their sentences for their service, and also the ability to see each other once a month. Regardless, both Punch and his lover Julie are scary as hell. Look at those faces. Can't say as much about their behavior, but you know, they're good enough for the Suicide Squad. Up next, number 7, James Gordon Jr. James Gordon Jr.'s parentage is pretty obvious, so we won't get into that. The Prime Earth version of James Jr. was an inmate at Arkham and had been alluded as being the catalyst behind his sister Barbara Gordon's paralysis at the hands of the Joker. Now in the New 52, we saw him torment the crap out of his sister, drugging her and trading her to the Joker in exchange for their mother's life. Eventually he fell from a rooftop thanks to a batarang thrown by his sister. He was believed to be dead, but would eventually be recruited to join up with the Suicide Squad, with his justification in joining apparently being that he was in love with poor Amanda Waller. Damn, that girl deserves better. Regardless, he's creepy as always manages to send chills down readers' spines, and is also missing an eye, which definitely doesn't help with the whole scary aesthetic. Actually, it improves the scary aesthetic, but I guess you don't want that to be improved because scary things are not fun. Unless you like scary things, in which case whatever floats your boat, no judgment here, but James Gordon Jr.? No thank you. In at number 6, Shauna Belzer, the ventriloquist. The telekinetic and insane Shauna Belzer debuted in the New 52 and Batgirl Volume 4 issue 20 in 2013, picking up a mantle of a Batman villain who previously managed to be pretty darn terrifying from time to time. As the ventriloquist, Shauna is borderline horrific, ghastly, and is not the kind of person that you would want to cross paths with. She comes from a family of talented creative individuals, in which she, in comparison, feels boring and plain. She was bullied while her twin brother was off being praised as an actor. Jealous, she targeted her brother and then killed him by sabotaging a swing set so that he would fall off of it. He hit the pavement and snapped his neck. Thus began her career as a serial killer, targeting classmates who had bullied her and eventually stealing a ventriloquist dummy that she named after her dead twin brother. That sounds like a creepypasta, for being honest. And at 5, Anchoress. The Anchoress is a special inmate on our list. She is the oldest living inmate in Arkham Asylum, having been born in Gotham City sometime around the year of 1898. When she was younger, she studied experimental and quantum physics in relation to the human body, much to her parents' disdain. They wanted her to jump into a marriage that they had arranged, and she was like, nah. This resulted in a fight one night between them, and a lab accident that then caused both of her parents to die and Anchoress's physiology to be altered on a quantum level. Now, because of how guilty she felt about her parents, she would commit herself to Arkham. 4 generations of doctors later, including ones prior to the boom of violent criminal inmates, she still wasn't cured, but rather was found so disturbing that doctors put their efforts elsewhere. She would blame Batman for the neglect she received thanks to him constantly depositing superpowered insane criminals into the asylum. So one night she lured the Cape Crusader there by using her quantum tunneling abilities to release the inmates, and then captured, mocked, and tortured Batman, making him relive his worst memories. He managed to break free and Anchoress was upgraded to a higher security cell. It now actually gets the attention from doctors that she wanted all along, so I guess that kinda works out for her. Regardless, she is spooky. And at number 4, Great White Shark. Warren White, aka Great White Shark, owes his time in Arkham for forging him into the villain he is today. The New Earth iteration of the character first appeared in 2003's Arkham Asylum Living Hell issue 1. Now Warren's origins play out as such. He was a crooked investor whose ruthlessness in the business world gave him the nickname Great White Shark. Eventually, he was caught by authorities and, thinking that he was smart, he pled insanity, which landed him a sentence inside of Arkham Asylum. It was more than he bargained for though. According to this version, Warren would be assaulted and locked in a refrigerator unit by a Jane Doe who wanted to take over his identity. He was injured, suffered from frostbite, which ultimately left him deformed. Now the frostbite had claimed his lips, nose, several fingers, hair, and made him super duper pale, all of which drove him to actual insanity. Now let's talk about the Prime Earth version of him in the current continuity. He's definitely spookier aesthetically, and for the most part, the criminal past and locked in the fridge bit remains the same. But what makes this one different, and scarier, is that he embraced his deformities and his insanity, sharpening his teeth, fully becoming the Great White Shark. Up next, number 3, Doodlebug. Doodlebug, aka Daedalus Bok, is a pretty small-time obscure villain, but horrific nonetheless. He's a dude with bright red eyes who usually is covered in blood, and fancies himself an artist. Now he claims to receive visions of inspiration, then compulsively recreates said visions on whatever canvas he can find. And those canvases, my friends, typically include human beings. To make it worse, his paintings and his appearance are modeled after real-life artist Jean-Michel Basquiat, whose artwork looks like this. Now imagine that, but instead of paint, it is made out of blood, and might be on a human body. Yeah, no thanks, Doodlebug. He ended up getting killed off though in Arkham Asylum Living Hell issue 6 as part of a demonic sacrifice, which really is just run-of-the-mill stuff over at Arkham. In at number 2, Amygdala. Here we have a character who really fits the bill aesthetically when it comes to scary supervillains. Amygdala is a hulking menace with brain damage who really doesn't like Dick Grayson. Now for starters, the amygdala is a part of the brain, in case you didn't know. It's an almond-shaped set of neurons located within the brain's medial temporal lobe, which plays a large role in processing emotions. So with that in mind, here's a story. He got that nickname after a botched surgery in Gotham General Hospital. He had been suffering from brain damage and the power went out during the surgery, causing the doctors to debate whether or not to pull him out of the operation. But before they could make the call, Amygdala, aka Aaron Helsinger, awoke in a rage. He smashed through the hospital windows to escape. The doctors had been working on his amygdala at the time. Now after his escape, he had attacked a young Dick Grayson who, in an attempt to defend his friends, fought the hulking creature, which caused Helsinger to fall off of a rooftop. Lots of falling off of rooftops, eh? And finally, in at number 1, Dr. Phosphorus. I wonder if I should kill you now or just give you cancer. That is a legit thing that Alexander Sartorius, aka Dr. Phosphorus, once said, and should paint a pretty clear picture as to why this dude has been an inmate in Arkham for so long. Debuting in 1977, Phosphorus has always been a scary sight for the eyes. He's essentially a glowing radioactive skeleton who wanted to build a nuclear power plant in Gotham, although he became the glowing skeleton after building a nuclear power plant. He was a regular dude before that, not to be misleading. Now when his plans in Gotham failed, he did it elsewhere, but the plant had a meltdown, forever irradiating and mutating him. He attempted to poison Gotham's water supply but was thwarted by Batman. He just doesn't like Gotham at all, holds a major grudge. He has a toxic radioactive touch, and if he were to shut off his phosphorus form, he would die since his central nervous system has been replaced by it. Now jump to the Prime Earth version of Dr. Phosphorus, who, thanks to modern art styles, is now even more terrifying than before. Here he is the ruler of the underground city of Cameltown, which lays beneath Arkham Asylum. And aside from having a run-in with Catwoman, he's generally less evil and genuinely wants to rule over his people peacefully, although he couldn't help but dabble in some chaos after the crime syndicate killed the Justice League and the world had basically gone to poop. He was like, yeah, I'm getting up there and I'm gonna have some fun. Cancer.
At number 10, Sasha Bordeaux. Sasha was Bruce Wayne's former bodyguard. She was sentenced to Blackgate after her and Bruce were accused of killing Vesper Fairchild. You might just think, oh man, what can a bodyguard do against dangerous criminals? Well folks, she not only had extensive training from the Secret Service, checkmate, and, wait for it, Batman himself. So you don't need to worry, she can definitely take care of herself. At number 9, Edward Nygma, also known as the villainous Riddler. Oh, and kinda a side thing, I'm gonna be talking about his time as a Blackgate prisoner during the Batman Arkham game series. In those games, first known as Edward Nashton, he was a member of the GCPD cybercrime division. Later on, he started trying to figure out who the Batman was, thus narrowing down his search to either Bruce Wayne or Harvey Dent. He also used informants to hide pieces of blackmail information about the city's worst criminals so that he, could watch the city collapse. And he did this all under an alias of Enigma. He was later caught and, sent to Blackgate. He later then changed his name to Edward Nygma for his obsession with puzzles and eventually went under the name The Riddler. Number 8. Black Mask. Now, here I am also talking about Black Mask's time at Blackgate during the Arkham games. Specifically Batman Arkham Origins. Black Mask, a ruthless crime lord who is skilled in hand-to-hand combat and a criminal mastermind, allegedly orchestrates a major criminal breakout from Blackgate, which causes a number of Batman's greatest foes to be released. And here's the kicker. It's on Christmas Eve. I mean, just when you think Batman might have a day off, someone has to ruin it for him. Black Mask also puts out a $50 million bounty on Batman's head, where later on we actually find out it was Joker. Sneaky Joker. Always has some sort of crazy plan. So now Batman has to deal with all these villains specifically coming after him because they all want to get their hands on all that moolah. Number 7. Deadshot. Now, Deadshot was also a prisoner of Blackgate during the Arkham games, and I know I am drawing heavily from that specific continuity, but as we go further down the list, that will start to change. But back to the main point, Deadshot was a prisoner of Blackgate. Deadshot is a master marksman and assassin. He was in the Marines, and his amazing aim is what earned him the name Deadshot. He rarely misses, his intended target. He also has been a member of the Suicide Squad. And during the events of the game, he's one of the main assassins hired to take out Batman. Like, at one point, he even saves Batman from Deathstroke. Now, before you go out and start making those matching best friend bracelets for Batman and Deadshot, he doesn't save him out of the kindness of his own heart. It's just because he wants to be the one to kill Batman and get the money for himself. Man, I was really hoping those two would just turn over a new leaf, become besties. Number 6, Killer Croc. Killer Croc was one of the criminals released from the Blackgate breakout. He stayed behind and let Batman come to him. He's really sneaky that way. He was also one of the 8 assassins specifically tasked to take out Batman. Now, Killer Croc was born with a genetic mutation that gave him green scaly skin, sharp teeth, and claws, which always made him feel kind of like an outcast as a kid. He was constantly bullied and harassed for how he looked. Aside from his looks, he also has enhanced strength, speed, and is, you guessed it, he's great in the water, which is where he tries to, take out most of his enemies. So for future reference, if you get an invitation for a pool party from him, I just wouldn't go. I really wouldn't go. Number 5, Bane. Every time I think of Bane now, my mind immediately thinks of Tom Hardy from Dark Knight Rises. I mean, he was terrifying, but, in the best possible way. But back to my main point, Bane is a character that has been to Blackgate both in the games and the comics. In the comics, he was sent there after an altercation with everyone's favorite bat, Batman, if you didn't know. They fought, and even though Bane was enhanced from all the venom, Batman had a new battle suit, and he cut those hoses, feeding Bane all of his venom supply, and then Batman proceeded to beat the living daylights out of him. And then Bane got sent to Blackgate. Though, don't feel too bad for him, he's still the guy that managed to break Batman's back, and he's very proud of that accomplishment. Number 4, Catwoman. Man, I had to stop myself. I was this close from starting off by just going like, meow. But, I count that as a huge win because as you guys are well aware by now, cheesy humor is my thing. But I guess I did eventually say it anyway. Selina Kyle. Now, here's a character with a lot of history, especially with Batman. She got sent to Blackgate when Batman found her stealing data from a Gotham City building. Before they end up fighting, a DEO team shows up and wants to take her in themselves. Batman warns them to stay back because Catwoman is very skilled. She's a master of stealth, combat, agility, and physical memory, meaning she can kind of pick up on things insanely quickly. And once she knows a move, she remembers it for her life. The DEO continues to argue, but during that time, Selina escapes. Batman eventually finds her and the two end up duking it out. Batman ultimately wins, but Catwoman has the last laugh because she uploads the data. But I guess Batman also laughs as well because he put her at Blackgate for it. So in a way, they both had a good laugh, I think. Number 3, Deathstroke. Now here's a guy that doesn't need any introduction. Okay, so I guess on number 2. No, I'm just kidding. I'm still gonna talk about him. He's Deathstroke. So, Deathstroke, also known as Slade Wilson, is an enhanced assassin who was experimented on by the US government. Because of that, he has enhanced strength, agility, endurance, intellect, and is a master in hand-to-hand combat. He is also one of the assassins hired to kill Batman. He doesn't succeed, and at the end of the game, he is a prisoner at Blackgate, but I wouldn't count on him staying there very long, because he'll escape. Bad guys always do. Always end up getting out of there. Number 2, the Joker. Oh man, the Joker. One of the most iconic villains of all time. Seriously, you don't get many villains like him. There's a reason so many high caliber actors want to play him. I mean, both Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix got Oscars for their portrayal. Joker is also one of the criminals who has been imprisoned in Blackgate both in the comics and the games. In the comic, Devil's Advocate, he is sentenced to death at Blackgate for his crimes. But of course, it doesn't end up working out, and he's later sent back to his favorite place in the entire world, which is Arkham Asylum if you didn't guess. In the games, it's revealed that he's actually the one who put the hit out on Batman, not Black Mask, and Joker was essentially behind everything, which ultimately doesn't sit too well with the real Black Mask. Number 1. Batman. Yes, Batman has been to Blackgate. Well, more specifically Bruce Wayne. As I mentioned earlier, Bruce and his bodyguard Sasha were both arrested for the murder of Vesper Fairchild, even though, they were both innocent. Regardless, Bruce being there automatically makes him the most dangerous person in Blackgate. And no one knows it. But we all know how dangerous he really is because he's freaking Batman. I wouldn't want to be one of the criminals who makes a mistake of crossing paths with him. I mean, superheroes in prison storylines are so cool. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's usually pretty awesome.